The nurse gave her an IV and she lay in my office for about 15 minutes. After that, she came back to her senses and seemed more like herself again. I approached her and asked, "Are you okay?" She looked at me and said, "Does it really matter? What's the point when you don't even know if you'll be alive tomorrow?" I smiled gently, trying to calm her down. "Look, we don't know anything for sure about the mass yet. It could just be a simple polyp, nothing more. Let's wait until the cystoscopy and we'll figure out the next steps. And even if it is cancer, it's treatable now. Cancer isn't the death sentence it used to be." As soon as I said the word cancer, she broke down in tears. "I'm just 34. I've always taken care of my health. I get checkups every 6 months, I go to the gym, I eat well. So why is this happening to me?" I nodded, acknowledging how hard it must have been for her. "You're doing all the right things, but cancer doesn't always work that way. Does anyone in your family have a history of cancer, especially bladder cancer?" She looked down, then said, "No, but my dad had prostate problems. After his prostate surgery, the cancer spread to his bladder and intestines. So, there's a genetic history." She just nodded, signaling a yes, and then I asked, "Do you smoke?" She quickly responded, "Only sometimes, when I need to feel at ease." I sighed, then replied, "That's another issue. Smoking directly affects bladder cancer. Actually, it increases the risk for any kind of cancer." She stared at me for a moment, and I couldn't meet her gaze. She whispered, "Am I going to be okay?" I gave a reassuring smile. "You'll be fine, madam." Tears streamed down her face as she reached out, taking my hand and pressing it to her heart. I didn't pull away, just watched as she held on to me. "I really miss you," she said, choking on her words. I felt a pang in my chest but quickly answered, "I'm married now, Georgina. I've moved on, forgotten the past." "I know," she replied, her voice soft. "I saw your profile picture with her. Is she really better than me?" I smirked and shook my head. "Don't even compare yourself to her. Better than you? Who do you think you are? You've forgotten how you begged for money, how you embarrassed me at that restaurant the last night we were together. You really think I've forgotten that? You were selfish, miserable, money-obsessed. All you cared about was clothes, jewelry, and cash. Don't even try to compare yourself to someone who's got their life together." She burst into sobs again, apologizing. "I'm sorry. I don't care about her. I don't want to compare myself to your angel." Smirked. "Everything's clear now. Come to the hospital on Wednesday for the cystoscopy. I hope it's just a simple polyp, nothing more." I noticed her IV was almost empty, so I removed it and told her to go home and rest. "Come back on Wednesday morning, but be fasting." She stood up, straightened herself out, and looked at me. "Shave completely, including your bikini area, and be prepared for the cystoscopy on Wednesday," I said. "Okay, doctor," she replied, then said goodbye and closed the door behind her. Wednesday arrived and I was in the hospital for surgeries and cystoscopies. I was waiting for Georgina to show up in the operating room. Finally, she came in. I performed the exam and it confirmed what I'd feared, a cancerous mass. I used the laser to remove it. The mass was bigger than what the ultrasound had shown. The day after her surgery, I went to check on her in the hospital. Her color had faded and she looked a little thinner. I called her name. "Georgina, are you okay?" She responded, "Yeah, I'm fine." "How was my surgery and the cystoscopy, doctor?" "It went well. Unfortunately, the mass was cancerous. We've sent a sample to pathology and it'll take about 10 days to determine the extent of it, whether it's spread to the lymph nodes, muscle tissue, or, God forbid, metastasized." Her eyes widened in shock, and I noticed her hands were shaking. I took her hands in mine and said, "Don't worry. From what I could see, it didn't look too serious. The tumor was superficial, and so far it doesn't seem like it's reached the muscles." Georgina's tears were falling like a waterfall, and I couldn't help but remember our past, the good and bad days, all the obstacles we faced together. Even though she wasn't the one for me, we still shared memories, and the thought of losing her was tearing me apart. I didn't know why she had started to matter to me again. Was it sympathy? Compassion? I couldn't say for sure. But whatever it was, it felt like I was cheating on Sandy, and I couldn't stand the weight of that feeling. I ran my hand through Georgina's hair, squeezed her hand, and said, "I'm waiting for the test results, but I'm sure it's nothing. Don't worry, Georgina." She gave me a bitter smile and whispered, "Thank you." As I left her room, the nurses were asking about other surgeries, but my mind was completely consumed by her. I couldn't focus on anything else, and this gnawing feeling inside of me wouldn't go away. Was I cheating on Sandy? She's so loyal to me. She doesn't even think about her ex-husband, so why am I fixated on Georgina? Why was I thinking about her all the time when I was lying in Sandy's arms? I was driving, and all these thoughts kept swirling in my head. I needed to talk to Sandy, so I called her and suggested, "Let's meet at a cafe, not at home. There's something I need to tell you." "What's going on, babe?" Sandy asked, sounding a little stressed. "Nothing, just some things I don't want our daughter to hear. Please meet me at the cafe near our place on time." "Okay, babe, see you soon," Sandy replied. I arrived at the cafe and saw Sandy sitting at our table. She was wearing a white coat and white pants, her curly hair styled perfectly, and her makeup light but elegant. She looked like a real princess with those beautiful eyes. "Hey, Sandy," I said, walking over and pulling her into a tight hug. "Hey, babe, what's going on? Why are your eyes so red?" she asked, looking at me with concern. "There's been some stuff happening lately that I haven't told you about," I replied. "What happened? Tell me, I'm all ears," she said, her voice full of curiosity. "I've got a new patient with bladder cancer," I said, trying to keep it casual. And honestly, this patient and her illness have been on my mind a lot. Sandy raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's not new, is it? You have a lot of cancer patients, don't you? Do they all occupy your mind like this?" I took a deep breath. "This one's different, Sandy. She's not just any patient. She's an old acquaintance. Someone I used to know." Sandy looked intrigued. "Who is she then?" I hesitated for a second. "You might not like hearing this." She insisted, "Come on, just tell me, I want to know." There was a long pause. Finally, I muttered, "Her name is Georgina." Sandy's eyes went wide and her mouth dropped open in shock. She covered her mouth with her hands. "Georgina? Your ex-girlfriend? She's fighting cancer?" I nodded. "Yeah, and what really hurts is that I can't help but feel, I don't know, is it sympathy? Maybe even compassion? For her? Which I don't usually allow myself to feel for patients. And these feelings are hurting me because sometimes I feel like my emotions for her go beyond just compassion. I find myself thinking about our past, feeling sad, and I don't know what to call it. But whatever it is, I want you to know so I don't feel guilty about hiding anything from you." Sandy smiled softly and said, "Thank you for sharing your feelings with me. What you're going through makes sense. She's someone you knew and you have memories with her. I understand that, and it doesn't make me feel insecure. But just try to control your emotions and treat her like any other patient. Don't let your feelings get in the way." I took a deep breath. "You know, Sandy, I'm an emotional guy. I never want to lose you. You're the love of my life, and I don't have any feelings for Georgina anymore. From now on, I want to tell you everything about her treatment process. I promise." Sandy smiled and reassured me. "I trust you, dear. Don't stress about it. I hope she gets better and can go back to living her life. I know you'll take good care of her." We finished our coffee and went home together. When we got there, Sandy had dinner ready, and we sat down to a lovely meal. Our daughter started talking about school, her friends, and how her birthday party was only 2 weeks away. Sandy said, "Invite all your friends, sweetheart. We'll make your birthday exactly how you want it." Our daughter looked up and said, "Mom, Dad, I want you to invite your friends too. Maybe Georgina could come as well? I think it would help her feel better." That's when my mind went blank, and Sandy added, "You can invite Georgina, dear. I think it would have a positive impact on her mood. And by then her pathology results will be ready. Whatever the outcome, having a good time will help her feel better, don't you think?" I was shocked. How could she be this kind and understanding? Isn't she jealous of her? Doesn't she realize Georgina was my ex? Doesn't she worry I might get too close to her again? Why would she say that? I didn't answer, just shook my head, feeling completely confused. Sandy, looking at me with a soft smile, said, "What if you give me her number and I invite her to the party myself, babe?" My mind went blank. How could she not be jealous of her? Why was she encouraging me to make these connections? I took a deep breath. "Yeah, no problem. I'll send her number to you on WhatsApp, and you can call her whenever. But honestly, I don't really agree with this. It doesn't make sense to bring Georgina into our home and personal space. I've been keeping my distance from her, keeping things cold and formal. I don't think it's right to have her here." Sandy didn't seem to understand. "Why, dear? She was once your friend, and now she's fighting cancer. Who knows if she'll be alive tomorrow?" Time snapped. My frustration got the better of me, and I raised my voice. "Why are you saying that? We don't know what the pathology results will show. Maybe with immunotherapy and the BCG vaccine, it'll clear up. She might not even need chemo or radiation. Science has come a long way. Why are you bringing her into our home, in front of our daughter? And if I shared anything with you about her, it was only because I was feeling guilty and self-conscious, not so you could become all friendly with her or invite her over. Sometimes, I just don't know if you're the wise woman I married. You're making me question everything." "Ever?" "Okay, if you don't want me to know what's between you two old friends, that's fine," Sandy said, her voice loud and filled with anger. "Seems like there are some things you're afraid to reveal." That's when I realized the mask Sandy had been wearing was just that. A mask. She didn't care that Georgina had cancer. She was just jealous of her trying to step back into my life after all these years. Sandy stood up from the table, stormed off into our room, and slammed the door shut. I could hear her crying from inside. I grabbed a pillow and blanket and ended up sleeping on the sofa that night. The next morning, I woke up to find Sandy had already taken our daughter to school without me, and she didn't even wake me up. That's when the distance between us began to grow. That day I tried calling Sandy, hoping to make things right, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I found myself opening Georgina's WhatsApp profile picture. I had added her number to her medical file, and now I was staring at her photo. I searched for her name on Instagram. Her page was public. She had 290 posts, and I went through every single one, curious to see how she'd changed over the years. I found myself scanning the comments too, trying to figure out who these people were. It was like I was drowning in emotions, but at the same time, I was trying to stay in control. 10 days passed since Georgina's surgery. My relationship with Sandy had gone cold, colder by the day. Then, finally, Georgina showed up at my office. She was wearing a red coat and a matching French beret, looking absolutely stunning. Her red lipstick reminded me of all those lovely moments we'd shared, and how I used to tell her how much I loved red. She greeted me sweetly, then with that familiar, mesmerizing style of hers, sat down across from me. The scent of her perfume hit me, almost taking my breath away. "How are you feeling, Georgina?" I asked. "I'm okay, dear." She called me dear, and it was like all the past memories, the dark and trashy ones, were fading away. I was suddenly blind to them. "Have you gotten your pathology results?" I asked. She looked down, a little hesitant, then replied, "I have, but I couldn't bring myself to open them." "Give them to me, please," I said. She reached into her bag and handed me a small white envelope. Her hands brushed against mine, and I couldn't help but notice the sparkle of her red nails against her pale skin. I opened the envelope, and as I glanced at the results, my heart skipped a beat. To be continued.